Hello and welcome back to Authentically Shawna. I'm your host, Dr. Shawna Burke. I am so excited to have a friend and mentor of mine, Jelinek, on the podcast. I call him Phil. I'm going to give a little background about Phil. He was a physics major with a math minor during college in the 1960s. And then he turned that training with mathematics into mechanics, which was another passion of his. He was a auto mechanic and shop owner, and then taught high school auto shop for 26 years. He is now retired. And in the 1980s, he started studying, sort of coincidentally in life, as a lot of things are, energy work. And that is how we know each other. We met each other at a seminar in February of 2, taught by Dr. Randall Roberg, who has his own technique called creative emotional wizardry. And Phil and I have been working together for the past couple of years. He's taught me so much about the energetic world and how it works and the basics of it. And one of the reasons I brought him on the podcast was I've now been to a lot of courses that talk about energetic medicine. And the running theme that I see through all of them is that no one talks about the basic definitions. And I don't think that's anyone's fault. I just think it's when you go to a course, you want to learn that information. But when I'm talking to people outside of the course, I understand that they don't understand the basics. And so sometimes, in my opinion, the energetic world can then feel very mysterious and very woo-woo when really it's just quantum physics. But if you don't know how quantum physics works, it seems very mysterious and spooky, spooky. So we're here to talk through some basic definitions and give some resources if you want to know more. So welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for being here. So we had created together something called a practice statement as a way to help people understand some of the basic definitions. So we're going to go through that as our jumping off point. So I'm going to ask you, because I think a lot of these, we'll say alternative practices, you use a technique called muscle testing. So can you tell us what is muscle testing?
Well, sure, Sean. Muscle testing uses a simple indicator neuromuscular reflex muscle test to determine a positive or negative function of your body. In other words, we're just going to ask yes, no questions. And the analogy to a computer is something most people in the energetic world use. And this is not a strength test, but a lock release test. In other words, you're not trying to fight the muscle. When you get a yes, the muscle stays strong. When you get a no, it just kind of releases. And it's interesting. The first time this happened to me, when I first started doing this, we were in summer camp for the church I was in at the time. And I had hurt my back doing a dive that I've done thousands of times, but maybe 15 years before I did this, and my body said, no, you're not going to do this anymore. Pulled a nasty muscle in my back. The caretaker of the facility happened to be an instructor for Jonnson Touch for Health. And Jonnson Touch for Health deals with running meridians and by doing muscle testing that way. And because my back hurt me so much, he couldn't use me for the muscle testing. So he used an intermediary. Sometimes we call them surrogates. And there was a young man, he's like 18, very robust. And the first time his muscles went weak, the shock on his face, I can still see it today. It's just shock. What happened to all of his strength? And again, because it's not a strength test, it's just a lock release. So I have that picture in my mind. So whenever I talk about lock release, it brings back these fond memories, which is a lot in the journey that we all have. We have certain parts that just kind of light your face up when you just think of fond memories and things like that. So that's kind of what muscle testing is. Just a simple indicator neuromuscular reflex muscle that we use. In other words, we're just going to take a muscle and check and ask a question, a yes, no question. Okay.
That's perfect. And so then I think that leads really well into the next question, which is, what are we testing?
Okay. So when we muscle test, we'll be using, over the years, people have found energetic test points in a person's energetic field, and we use that as an indicator muscle to test various computer programs, and we're going to use the computer analogy here, within your bodily systems to normalize energy flow. In other words, sometimes there's blockages in the energy flow, and when we test, we'll get a weak muscle, and then we'll perform something and we remove the blockage, and then all of a sudden it tests strong. So that's what we'll be testing for.
And at least in my understanding, a lot of these ideas came out of traditional Chinese medicine. So if you've ever been to an acupuncturist, someone who's looking at the meridian flow, when you go to an acupuncturist and they're really looking for, okay, where is energy stagnant in the body? And when we see stagnant energy, that tends to be associated with either a precursor or the cursor of disease. So that's why we're using this as an indicator. At least for me, muscle testing is great because it can catch something before it becomes a disease. It can catch something before it's a really big, we're going to see it on a X-ray, MRI, blood test. A lot of these things, because they're energetic, we can catch them with muscle testing way before any other test could identify something going on.
Correct.
So that brings up another question. So what even is your energetic field?
Well, the energetic field, a lot of people get mystified over this, and it actually is quite simple. As an auto shop teacher, I dealt with electricity quite a bit, teaching my students how to use a computer, all works on the energetic electricity principles. And so whenever electricity flows through a wire, it creates a magnetic field around that wire. Electricity and magnetism go hand in hand. One doesn't work without the other. They work together for that. So our bodies operate through electrical impulses. The brain sends an electrical impulse to a muscle, and the muscle contracts or expands, and something moves. So this magnetic field is created around those electrical impulses. And that's what creates what people call our aura, or the word isn't coming to me now, morphogenic field. That's the word I was looking for. There's a class in morphogenic field technique. So there's a lot of people look at energy and they put their own terms on it, but there's just the basics are the basics. So this is what we're going to be covering, the basics.
So what will you be testing in an energetic field?
Well, again, when the electrical energy flows and is normalizing, we try to balance the computer's programs. And then once we balance these computer programs, the body will correct itself. So what we'll be doing is we'll be testing these different body priorities, and they will be correcting themselves in the realm of physical, mental, structural, emotional, and nutritional areas. We'll also be testing your subconscious, which is a blueprint of your unfiltered experiences from conception to the age of reason, approximately age 6. Now, I want to spend some time on this because most people just don't realize that our subconscious is separate from our conscious brain. And I would refer you to this book called The Biology of Belief by Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's a medical doctor and a research doctor, so he has a Ph.D. as well. And he's the one that realized that we have two separate brains, our conscious brain and our subconscious brain. So I would encourage you, if you want to continue in this, to get this book and read it. It took me reading it about 3 times over a period of about 8 to 10 years. And then as I gained more experience, each time I read the book, I got a deeper and more profound understanding of the conscious and subconscious brains.
Amazing. I've also listened to the book because if you don't know this about me, I'm a big listener of books. I don't do a lot of reading. I do a lot of listening to books.
As
And
do I.
yes, Phil's also a big listener of books. And something that I want to also touch on in the subconscious and how that applies to muscle testing is a lot of times we can ask your body a question that you consciously think one thing and your body will show something very different. And there a lot of times is this really big mismatch between your conscious and your subconscious. And I think unless you've experienced that, it's very difficult to understand that what you think is happening is a lot of times not.
Well, what's interesting is Dr. Lipton, when he explains muscle testing, it's a real treat to read how he did this. He was in a motorcycle accident, and his therapist said, "You need to go see a chiropractor." Now, if you're in the energetic community, chiropractors are kind of looked down upon by medical doctors. So he was kind of iffy in going to this chiropractor. And so the first time he was asked, is your name Bruce Lipton? And he said yes, and his muscle held strong. And then the chiropractor asked, is your name Mary? And his muscle went weak. And now, as he's explaining this, he goes, I can lie to him, but what he found out was his subconscious will not lie, which is why we get very accurate results when we use muscle testing. Please read the book to get the better and longer version of that. I really encapsulated that into just a short piece.
But I think it's important to know. I was hoping you would bring that story up.
Yes.
So the next question is, so how does the body heal?
Well, that's another interesting aspect of the way our bodies are designed. Your body will correct itself when given the proper physical, mental, structural, emotional, and nutritional stimuli. A lot of times, there's blockages or roadblocks or anything you want to talk about, a disconnect. And what we're trying to do as energy workers is we're trying to see if we can remove what's causing the blockage. Once we remove what causes the blockage, the body is amazing. It will heal itself. So nobody heals your body. Your body does all the healing on its own. And, it's a very simple thing, but it is what it is. And most people just don't realize it's that simple, that the body does heal itself.
And then I think the point is that you don't go to a doctor to heal you.
Right. Doctors are very good for many, many things. And I don't want to get into that here, but these yes no questions are you can get to be very pointed and direct as to what you're looking for and get very profound and correct answers. And again, once you remove the roadblocks, the body will then heal itself.
And then so the question would then be, why can't the body correct itself without intervention or without help?
Well, your body is constantly sending out signals for what it needs in order to correct itself. Our job as energy workers is to find out what connects and what doesn't connect to aid in this correction. Your body does all the work after the connections are made. We merely facilitate the process, and then we just watch what's happening and stand back. And it's amazing to watch when this really happens.
Fantastic. So that's our basic definitions, I would say, of what's happening in the energetic space when you go and see someone who practices quote unquote energy work. That's the general idea and concept. Now I want to dive in a little bit deeper to some of the bigger vocab and concepts in quantum physics. Haha, minor topic. So the first place I want to start is talking about the two different energies in the world, in our universe. And those would be the particle energy field and the 0 point energy field. So can you explain to us why there's two energies and how those two work?
I can do that because of the classes that I've taken in the energy work, and along with my year and a half of college as a physics major with a math minor. Mathematics is just the language of the science. This is how everybody in the science community talk to each other. They talk through math. Math is an actual language. So I ended up taking this class called Matrix Energetics, taught by Dr. Richard Bartlett and Melissa Joy Jonnson. I was blown away because in my mind, things have to make sense. I need to understand how things work in order for me to operate. It's part of the science part of my brain. I need to have a step-by-step how this works. So I've taken matrix energetics 3 different times. Again, each time I took it, a year, 2 or 3 years apart. With the experiences I've had between taking the classes, I've learned a deeper understanding of matrix energetics, again, each and every time I took it. So Dr. Bartlett talks about the particle energy field and the 0-point energy field. And these fields are the only 2 energy fields out in the universe. Every other field is a subset of particle energy field or the 0-point energy field. So let's start with the particle energy field, because the particle energy field is the one most of us can understand very easily. But if you understand, we also have to follow the scientific laws that energy and matter, there's a limited amount of energy and matter in the universe. Energy and matter are not destroyed. They just change forms. So like take a log and you put it in a fireplace. The energy of that log will turn into light, heat, sounds. And so the log, as it's using up the energy of burning, creates other energy. And again, energy and matter they're basically the same thing, they just change forms. So in a particle energy field, what we call something like the kitchen table we're sitting at. Now, it's made of oak, and we think it's very solid. Field or atomic realm that we live in, the world that we live in, this is considered solid. But in science, nothing is solid, because when we go down to the molecules of the oak are created by the different protons, neutrons, and electrons that make up the atoms, and the different atoms make up the molecules that make up oak. Well, all of those are in constant motion. And that is what kind of determines what the different particles are. Now, the particles, what we consider solid, being in motion, nothing is solid in the science realm. So as you get farther and farther down, the protons, neutrons, and electrons, they're made up of what we call quarks, and quarks are made up of something else. And that's when we get into the quantum field or the quantum mechanics, is when we get into the subatomic particles, particles that are smaller than the nucleus of the proton and neutron and the electron. So there's just a finite amount of solid matter that we call the particle energy field. And so that's the energy of the particles, of all the particles in the universe. The 0-point energy field is called that because it's the energy of the space between the particles. Now, the energy of the space between the particles approaches 0, which is why they call it the 0-point energy field. However, there is so much space out in the universe that the power contained in the 0-point energy field is 10 to the 40th power. That's 10 with 40 zeros after it. More energy than the particle energy field. Dark matter, black holes, all of this form in they're subsets of these 2 energy fields, the particle energy field and the 0-point energy field. And Dr. Bartlett goes over and spends some time explaining the 0-point energy field and works primarily out of the 0-point energy field, but you also work with the particle energy field. So this is a rather simple definition of what the 2 energy fields out there are called.
Thank you. I know that is a conversation that I've had with lots of people now that you've taught me at multiple courses that I've taken. Could you connect 2 ideas? So why would energetic medicine or energy workers, why would you want to work in the energetic field versus, the 0-point energy field versus the particle energy field? Why would that be? Why would that matter? to know the difference? Why would that matter to choose to work in one versus the other?
When you work in the particle energy field, you're fairly limited to the amount of work that you can do on a client. And when you work in the 0 point energy field, because there's so much energy available to tap into, sometimes you can do 10 times the amount of work for a single session or sitting. And when you work in the 0 point energy field, things also work a lot faster as well. So again, we're just touching just the basics here.
Which I think is important to delineate because from being both ends of this perspective, right? I'm a patient and I'm a practitioner. I think it's really important to note that I think unless you are aware and are tuning into the particle energy field and the 0 point energy field, you're likely only in the particle energy field. If you don't have the awareness that there is another option, the likelihood is you are working, we're going to say in a slower, less bandwidth model.
Correct.
I just wanted to make that very clear.
Yes.
Okay, I want to talk about some of the major techniques that you've learned and some of the big ideas that those have sparked. And if I could put a big category of the techniques that you've learned, I would say that they generally fall under an umbrella that we called applied kinesiology.
Correct.
Can you tell us in your words, what is applied kinesiology?
Well, applied kinesiology is, I believe, just a movement of muscle, and applied kinesiology is what we usually term is muscle testing. And so it's just kind of a simple term. Now, muscle testing is just a subset of dowsing. I don't know if you're familiar with the term dowsing, but people have used twigs and rods and things held by two hands in a kind of like a wishbone fashion, and they've been able to find water. This has been going on for centuries of dowsing, and muscle testing is just another form of dowsing. There are a number of classes out there that spend a whole afternoon in a foundational class to help people understand what this history of dowsing, what it is, and will help you determine, if you're not familiar with muscle testing, how to find what works for you. Just about as many people that are out there as the different forms of muscle testing that you can do. There's a few basics that will help you understand the concepts, and then you have to find something that fits what I call your worldview.
Please define that because I think it's really important.
All right. So this is how I would look at things. Again, this is my scientific brain that needs to have some definitions. So when I talk about worldview, I'm talking about, all of us have a different worldview. Now, I created 7 words to help people, me, understand my view of what somebody's worldview is. The first one is historic. Your history is unique to you and made up of your past, present, and future events as they have affected you or will affect you. All of that is different. It's unique to you. Your your physical makeup is obviously unique to you. Number 3, relatable. How is it possible to understand, like, or have sympathy for because of similarities to oneself or one's own experiences, again, which are unique to you, your environment that you grew up in? It's a combination of external and physical conditions that affect your influences of growth, development, behavior, and survival of you as you grew up and is unique to you. Again, all of these are unique to you. Your perspective. This is your capacity to view things in their true relations or relative importance to you. Genetic, that's number 6. This is you relating to or determined by the origin, development, or causal antecedents of who you are, the mix of your parents, the genes and the DNA samples. And again, we're just unique. And the experiences. This is your active participation in events or activities leading to your accumulation of knowledge and or skill. Again, all of which is unique to you. So what this means to me is that each and every one of us is totally unique and different from everyone else in the world. No one thinks or acts like you or me. And when you learn something from somebody, no matter what it is, I learned mechanics through the teaching of other people. I learned energy work from the teaching of other people. What you do is you take it, you filter it through your worldview, and you make it your own. And again, that makes it unique. No one else thinks like you, no one else acts like you. And so that's what makes somebody totally different from anybody else in the world. Don't ever think he thinks or she thinks just like I do. Ain't gonna happen.
Which is interesting to say the least, to be human. Uh,
We've had this discussion a
yeah.
number of times.
So I want to talk about some of the techniques that have influenced how you think and how you practice.
Okay.
And one of those techniques, which I think really shaped modern applied kinesiology and modern energy work, is a technique that was developed by Dr. Viktor Frank called total body modification. So tell us what you got from learning with Dr. Viktor Frank.
Well, this all started back in the 1980s when I got a rash over my entire body. And the HMO that I was at the time kept feeding me all kinds of drugs and stuff. And after a period of time, I had this rash for a year and a half. So after I worked with them, they were giving me steroids to control the rash. And when I saw the doctor, he had a rash. So I went to the head dermatologist of this HMO and I noticed he had a rash. And I'm going, well, these people can't help me. So this is what caused me to start looking into alternative health. And I kept working on the alternative health until I found Dr. Corinne Allen. And she had problems in college with her nutrition. And she got her doctorate in nutrition. So a lot of us get into this field because of personal problems. And she was using a technique called total body modification. And so because I knew muscle testing, we worked together because I could give her feedback from, how she worked on me. And because, the muscle testing, most people didn't know this back in the East. It was a unique experience for both of us. So in 2006, when she moved up to Idaho from Southern California, I asked her if she could teach me this TBM. She said, no, it's too complicated. So she was the one who introduced me to Dr. Viktor Frank, who created TBM in the 1970s. He was teaching classes, and I was one of 25 people. Most of them were chiropractors and various professional degreed people. There were 4 of us in the class that did not have degrees to quote unquote touch people. I was one of them. But having been a teacher for a number of years, I was the most vocal. I'd ask questions that for a chiropractor is so simple. I'd never heard. What's an occiput? Had no idea. And I'm sure all these chiropractors were just cringing. Why are you wasting our time? But Dr. Viktor Frank would teach anybody if they really wanted to learn. And I'm very thankful that he allowed me to stay in the class because once I took his 4 modules, I was kind of grandfathered in and I was allowed to take all the other classes. And that was basically the starting point for me really getting into energy work.
Tell me, what are some of his main tenets and ideas that he taught in his course about the body and about what are some of his main techniques, we'll say, things that he was looking at?
He had 3 main points. Balance somebody's sugar, get them hydrated, and get them out of sympathetic mode into parasympathetic. Now, all that means is get them out of fight or flight. In other words, you're under stress, to being relaxed. In other words, you're going to be sleeping, and as you sleep, your body during the certain sleep cycles does the regenerative healing that your body needs, the recuperative powers of sleep. And he said, if you do those three things, 85% of what people come in for will be taken care of. Their bodies will be able to take care of it and heal themselves. And so he developed a number of body points. They're acupressure points. And if you know anything about acupuncture, there are how many are you familiar with the 260 some acupuncture points? Acupressure and acupuncture is the same thing, except the acupuncture, they use a needle to stimulate it. Acupressure, you just take your hand or finger or thumb and you put pressure on that point. So it works in similar ways. You're stimulating the energy of that meridian that I talked about on John Thee's Touch for Health, all the meridians that he did and ran and introduced me to back in the 1980s.
So as someone who's a few decades younger than you, it's interesting because you got to learn that technique at a time when he was alive.
Mm-hmm.
He's now passed. And so I think because of his work, there are now so many techniques in existence that really started with his work. His work was foundational, I would say, to at least mostly in the chiropractic world, or most people who study this are chiropractors. He was the founder of so many techniques, and so many people give him credit for that. When you go to courses now, teachers who are teaching more energetic based techniques started with him, and he was really the person who kind of snowballed that for this next generation in front of me, and then for my generation as well.
Viktor Frankl, a number of people that started, Scott Walker, who started neural emotional technique, started from Dr. Frankl's TBM, a total body modification. Richard Bartlett took his son at 6 years old to Dr. Viktor Frankl, and Dr. Viktor Frankl did his thing, and his son's body reacted to it and healed the condition. And again, these people took the information, filtered it through their worldview, and then created their own system. And there's quite a few systems out there. I believe NAET, I don't exactly know what that stands for, but there's a number of systems out there that have taken this TBM, total body modification, and have jump-started other people because, again, they use their worldview to take what they've learned and they make it their own because they see things differently than anybody else. And then they present it, create a whole system from their point of view.
I love that. So I think that that's a good place for us to wrap it up for today. This is definitely not the last conversation we're having. I will definitely make you come on again. Ha ha ha. So thank you so much for sharing the basics. I will link some of the resources that we discussed in the show notes. So if you want to go, if you didn't have a pen or something, you to write it down while you were listening, the ideas and some of the basic tools to learn more about this information will be in the show notes for you.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me.
You're so welcome. You've been listening to Authentically Shawna with Dr. Shawna Burke. The information contained in this podcast is provided for information purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products or techniques referenced in this podcast, consult your healthcare provider. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to or herein. Speaking of products, if you need some help with your hair, DM me at Dr. Shawna Burke for a hair care quiz, and we'll get you started on turning around your hair and scalp health. Until next week.